What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Let's Talk MMA podcast, and we got to talk about a lot of stuff, actually. So UFC 301 happened to actually perform better than we expected. Not a lot of name value, but the performances were actually kind of entertaining. The main event, Steve Erceg absolutely won that fight. He looked amazing in the stand-up against Pantoja. The jabs, the counter left hooks, even some of the counter right hands, and fading out the opposite direction. Steve Erceg's boxing is a sight to behold. I mean, he is extremely technical, but he made those errors in the fourth and fifth rounds of shooting takedowns. I don't know why, other than just his inexperience showing, right? That was only his fourth UFC fight, so he is going to make mistakes, but man, was that a bummer. Regardless, though, he won the fight, or at least he should have. At the very least 3 rounds, but I believe he won 4 rounds out of the 5. We have to always remember that takedowns don't mean anything unless they do something with it. Top control means absolutely nothing. Control time means absolutely nothing. None of this is even scored. Unless it's used to potentially finish the opponent or get closer to doing so, which didn't happen too often, other than getting the positions. And interesting enough, Demetrius Johnson gave his opinion about Alexandre Pantoja's skills, and he says that he doesn't remind him of some of the best fighters at that weight class, like Henry Cejudo, Davis Figueiredo. He was implying that Pantoja reminds him of just like some other pretty good fighter, and not necessarily one of the best of all time. The qualities that Pantoja has better than almost everybody is a granite chin, right? He has a better chin than almost anybody else in that weight class ever. His jiu-jitsu is very top-notch. He's scrappy, he has considerable power if he hits you clean, but that's the key word there, if he hits you clean, because his striking isn't really all there technically. Demetrius also had another interesting take about flyweights headlining pay-per-view cards. He was even suggesting that they shouldn't headline a pay-per-view card because they just don't garner enough tension, and he was looking at his YouTube videos, the views and the engagements and all that stuff, and he just noticed that people don't care. When flyweights headline a pay-per-view, the general audience just doesn't seem to care, and it's been a thing for a very long time. Even back when he was headlining pay-per-views, they drew very little attention. I think Cejudo made some noise in the Moreno versus Figueiredo rivalry, but I think it's more than just the fact that they're flyweights. Number one, Pantoja is just not a big star. Doesn't even seem like the Brazilian crowd gets behind him too much. I mean, they were leaving the arena when he was trying to have him listen to his post-fight interview. But they left so fast. When you look at the seats, so many of them were empty. When the guy just wants like a couple minutes to talk to the audience. And number 2, Pantoja was fighting the number 10 ranked fighter. You know, that's not going to get a lot of people excited, especially for the fact that Steve Erceg is not a big star himself. You know, he's not a guy that a lot of people know about. The only redeeming quality of the card after the main event was Jose Aldo, right? Jose Aldo's comeback was something that maybe some people would be willing to watch, but even Aldo in his prime wasn't selling a lot of pay-per-views. He was drawing like 200,000, of course, except the Conor McGregor fight. And I just don't know if flyweights ever going to have that big star that makes people willing to pay $70+ to watch him fight, which is an insane price. And it seems like it's only going up. I don't know what the solution is for these guys. I don't know what the flyweights need to do in order to make people care about them. Because the hardcore fans, of course, care. They need the casual fans to care if they want to headline pay-per-views. I think the general audience just doesn't care about them, as sad as that is. And now I don't know what they're going to do with Pantoja. He beat so many top 10 guys already. It's absolutely insane. You can't do the Royval fight. Do you do Muhammad Mokaev? And that would be going from the number 10 guy to the number 5 guy. And as for Erceg, he absolutely needs to be in the top 5. Even though he officially lost the fight, and maybe he goes up against someone like Royval or Moreno. And in that co-main event, Jose Aldo making a successful return. I mean, looking like the king that he is. Hands up high, guard up, Leany bouncing for a check. And he was letting his hands go in those combinations and showed to be more powerful than Martinez. And it just further proves that Jose Aldo is so big for this weight class. He can hurt anybody with his punches. Martinez made a bit of mistake in the early rounds where he fought at a pretty slow pace and not put on the pressure on Aldo, which is something that you have to do. You cannot fight Aldo in a neutral ground unless you're like Conor McGregor or something, or maybe Alexander Volkanovski. He started to put on the pressure in the 3rd round and really went for the win. So you have to give a lot of credit to Martinez for that, but he ran into a lot of danger as well. You know, he puts himself through the fire, got hit by some big right straights, and I love the way Aldo throws it these days, man. He just pops it forward, brings it back right into stance, perfect right straights that he throws. And we all saw Jose Aldo go for a mercy takedown. When he rocked Martinez, he went for a takedown, and it looked like he only did it to not like hurt Martinez's career by finishing him off or something, you know? This kid has a future, and I'm not going to destroy him. Jose Aldo is one of a kind, man. He's such an insanely good fighter, even at his age, beating some ranked guys. Hear me out, though. Okay, Jose Aldo is one of my favorites of all time. He looked a little too good, if you know what I'm saying. No Jon Jones. Is it a coincidence that him and Chris Weidman looked really, really good, and Weidman's been looking like trash for the past few years? As soon as USADA leaves, these guys are performing better than we've seen them in a long time. And they're older than ever. I'm not going to say Aldo's on anything, but it wouldn't surprise me. Any fighter at this point would not surprise me with USADA gone. I was so happy to see him win, and he's back. He's not going to have a one-off here. I thought he was going to come in, fight out his contract, and go to boxing or something, permanently. But he says that he wants to make a run for the title. I don't know if he beats Sean O'Malley, but it's going to be quite interesting. I'd love to see him fight Henry Cejudo. That would probably be the fight to make next for Jose Aldo. They were supposed to fight each other in the past. And then we go to the next fight with Vitor Petrino, which is actually something I don't even want to talk about. What was that? Why did he shoot a takedown? And after he shot it, why did he lift Anthony Smith up for like a hot 2 seconds before slamming him? Because when he lifted Smith up, Smith was setting up that guillotine. I mean, you got the choke in, legs around the body, and then Vitor slams him and instantly gets tapped out. That had to have been one of the worst fight IQ moments I've ever seen. And he destroyed a lot of people's parlays, man. Guru was right. They have to put these IQ stats on the tail of the tape or something, you know. We got to know what these guys are working with. And Anthony Smith now is going to be more delusional than ever. Why, Vitor? Why would you do this to everybody? Anthony Smith is going to start talking about how, oh, Jon Jones, he's nothing. I'm going for his belt after I get Alex Pereira's belt because both these guys are trash. I'm the greatest of all time if, on paper, you eliminate my weaknesses. Michel Pereira being a destroyer of men at 185 pounds. He's a whole different fighter up there. Bro really came out there not dancing during his entrance, which is a bit of a disappointment. We all want to see the dance. 1-2 blasted Potieira to the ground. Backflip execution, kicking him to the face. They get up, Pereira chokes him to sleep with a guillotine. All within 54 seconds. Now, Potieira is not the best opponent. He's not super high skilled, but he was a former light heavyweight. Took this up on short notice. He made weight, so credit to him. But Michel Pereira needs to be fighting ranked opponents. I think he could get to the top 7 of middleweight. Maybe even top 5. Maybe. But I think top 7 is where he's going to be. Can you imagine a Michel Pereira and Paulo Costa fight? Do you know how insane that would be? I would love to see that fight. Make it like the third to last fight on a pay-per-view or something. The buzz, the excitement, the power that Pereira brings, the ferocity from Paulo Costa. Definitely not 5 rounds. Don't make that fight 5. And is it crazy to say that Pereira might beat Paulo Costa? I don't know if that's an insane take. He's just so incredibly fast at 185. Yo, for sure no more backflips though, because he could have gotten disqualified if he like knocked Potieira out with that. I don't even know what he's trying to do with that. Is he trying to like pass into north-south or side control? Is he trying to stomp the body? I don't understand his motive in doing the backflip other than just putting on a show. He's not really thinking about what could happen. I'm liking Michel Pereira, man. He's one of my favorite middleweights to watch right now. Caio Borralho actually getting a knockout win. Very rare for his career, but it was against Paul Craig, who's extremely chinny, and beyond that, easy to hit. If you don't follow him to the guard, you pretty much beat this guy, because Paul Craig probably has the most dangerous guard from 185 and up. But the win condition on beating Paul Craig is very simple. Just don't follow him to the ground because he can't take you down, most likely. His wrestling is not strong whatsoever. His striking is not strong. He's got some kicks. He's got to develop some boxing and wrestling, or one of the two. I did see a glimpse in his boxing potential, though. He did land that straight on Caio Borralho. Caught his attention with it, but man, is he lacking in most areas of the game. You cannot be a specialist anymore. Being a specialist, relying on your Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu only, is like a 2014 thing. And for his next fight, let's give Caio Borralho maybe Jack Hermanson or Roman Dolidze. Those are the perfect opponents for him. Joanderson Brito getting the weird TKO win off of a cut from a leg kick against Jack Shore. I don't think they should have stopped the fight. Now, I'm not a doctor. I don't know how bad the cut was. I don't know what the dangers were. It looked pretty bad. It looked like someone shanked his shin, but he wasn't limping. Didn't seem to really affect him, which I think is the reason you would stop the fight. Imagine a cut on the face, like above the eyebrow. If the thing is leaking into your eye, that's usually when they try to stop it, because that affects your ability to see punches, which puts you in a lot of danger. A weird way to win for Joanderson Brito. Now, he wasn't the one that called it off, so we can't blame him. He was celebrating like he just beat the champion or something, but with how the fight was going, I think Joanderson was going to win the fight regardless. I mean, that was a lot of damage on the leg, and Jack Shore wasn't doing too much addressing it. So I think at some point, Shore was going to be limping. He was going to be easier to get hit in the head, but who really knows at the end of the day if it didn't get stopped there? I mean, Jack Shore could have probably just like landed some big shot and put Brito down. It's fighting at the end of the day. Let's do Brito versus Sadiq Youssef next. Lucindo had a good win against Carolina. Myktybek Orolbai gained that decision win against Elves Brener. Now, we cannot fault him for not going for the finish both times when he hurt him. Happened once in the first, happened another time in the second, because he is young and quite inexperienced in MMA. This guy has some crazy power because Elves Brener was the same guy that was eating Guram shots, walking through him like a Terminator and returning with his own. He could not do the same against Orolbai. Orolbai's right hand is something insane. He throws it kind of like Davidson Figueiredo in a way. Heavy leverage, full extension, and all of his body weight behind it. I told you guys, this guy's got the power of the Khans or something. There's something going on with Orolbai's power and strength. He is so incredibly physical on his opponents while also being impressively technical for his age, right? He's only like, 25, 26 years old? And that's the reason I think why he didn't go for the knockout finish. He had Brener all kinds of hurt in that first round, but he instead tried to wrestle with him. Then it happened again in the second round, and it just seems like he's more confident in his wrestling than his striking. And then that one weird part where they took the point away from him for grabbing the cage, which they didn't do the same thing to Steve Erceg in the main event. And I don't know which one I like better. Do I like the ref taking the point away instantly like that, or just giving a warning and letting it play out? You got to do something though. If someone's grabbing the cage, they can't just get away with it. If he's not going to take a point away, at least put him on the ground if that takedown was going to be successsul, right? If it looked like it was going to take him down, put him on the ground. If not, take the point away. So in that third round, Orolbai couldn't really win unless he dominated it and got 10-8, which would have been a 9-8. But he drew it, right? He hurt Elves Brener at the end of the fight, dropping him when Brener, I think, was throwing the kick, and he ultimately won the fight, man. I'm very high on Myktybek Orolbai, especially if he tightens up a bit of his boxing and gets more comfortable using his boxing to end fights instead of a reinforced wrestling game. This guy is going to be a problem, man. But I wonder if Brener's weight cut has something to do with him getting hurt like that, because it looked like his weight cut was pretty bad, but I just wonder if Orolbai is that powerful. Regardless, bro, these guys are repping Genghis Khan proud, man. You got him, Shavkat, this new guy they just signed. Oh, what's his name, man? I just saw he got signed by the UFC. I've seen a couple of his fights, and he's really good. From the Central Asia region. He's undefeated and really good, dude. I found him. Oh, that's a long name. Niem Jargol Tumendembarel. Oh, wait, he is actually from Mongolia. He's not from the other countries around. Oh, and just to be accurate for anybody that does think that the Asian people in those quote-unquote Russian Central Asian countries, they're not all related to Genghis Khan, but a lot of them are, as Genghis Khan ran right through those countries in the beginning of his campaign and had a lot of babies. A lot of babies. Fun fact, Kazakhstan actually recognizes Genghis Khan as a Kazakh, the country that Shavkat is from. I mean, technically, you could say he was a Kazakh because he did invade the country and conquer it, but they hold Genghis Khan with a specific identity. And the other fight I wanted to talk about was Mauricio Ruffy, aka the Brazilian Conor McGregor, mixed with a little bit of Zabit. Getting scissor swept like that has to be so humiliating. Not because it was some amateur move, of course not, but your opponent is dominating you, humiliating you. He's bullying you, son. But then again, Anderson Silva, for a lot of people that don't know, he got submitted by a similar technique, the flying scissors heel hook, when he fought Ryu Chonin back in Pride. And Anderson was terrorizing this guy before that happened. But man, I just love that move. It's so cool, dude. Mauricio Ruffy is going to be a problem for these lightweights. Beautiful counters, man. Good targeting. Really good shot selection. UFC 301 was actually pretty nice the way it performed. It's just, you got to get some bigger names on the cards if you want people to pay $70 for. The next card is Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento. The Blobs, man. Why are the Blobs main eventing again? I'd rather see Rebellis Despain headline over Derek Lewis. Am I the only one on that? I'd rather see Mateusz Rebecki, who's on that card, by the way, find Diego Ferreira. Way better fight than the main event. Coles Olberg is fighting Alonzo Menefield. That's a way better fight than the main event. Joaquin Buckley versus Ruzaboyev. Why isn't that the main event over Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento? We know neither of these guys are ever touching the belt. We know neither of these guys are probably ever even getting into the top 5 ever again. Bro, I'd rather see Bruce Leroy versus Sean Woodson as a main event over that. And I said it like it's a bad fight or something. Bruce Leroy and Woodson is actually kind of interesting. Chase Hooper versus Slava Claus. I'd rather see Tabitha Ritchie in the main event. If you ain't like Jon Jones, you would agree with me. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. Jake Hadley's on the card too. I like Jake Hadley. Kevin Jusey is on the card. Dude, you got a lot of really good prospects. Esteban Ribovic. Wait, he's not Serbian. Ribovics. This fight night is actually kind of insane with prospects. And they want to headline with Derek Lewis and Nascimento. If it was like a pay-per-view, I understand catering to the casual audience, but casuals don't watch fight nights like that. Fight nights are mostly for the hardcore fans. Unless you do got a big name like Khamzat versus Whittaker. That's going to be viewed by a lot of casual fans. Literally pick another fight, and that headline's better than Derek Lewis and Nascimento. I'm tired of the heavyweights headlining fight nights. It's just not as interesting. It's not as fun. Unless it's like one of the top ranked guys, but we're getting two low-end top 15. Derek Lewis seems to be very close to retirement. Nascimento is not exciting to watch usually. And you got all these other great fighters on the card. Rubelas Despain would probably knock both of these guys out in the main event right now. They should have him run the gauntlet of the blobs. Have him headline these fight nights, knocking the blobs out. No, but for real, the card's actually pretty nice. A lot of really cool fights on there. What's the next one? Edson Barboza versus Lerone Murphy. You got KS Williams versus Carlston Harris. That's a pretty good fight. I like that one. Umar C's on the card, going up against Rodolfo Bellato. For anybody that doesn't know Umar C, watch some of his fights at KSW. He's got some pretty good grappling. Adrian Yannis on the card. Abus Magomedov is on it, and he's fighting Warley Elves. The Abus experiment is not doing too great. They had him fight really high-ranked guys after his UFC debut. I mean, Sean Strickland and Caio Borralho. But then again, Caio wasn't necessarily highly ranked when he fought him. But we know Borralho's skills. He's absolutely going to be somewhere probably in the top 5 in the future. He's a very intelligent fighter. Here he should be able to beat Warley Elves, I think. Tom Nolan's on the card. Interesting. And then after that is UFC 302. And I'm super interested to see what happens in the co-main event and main event of that. Sean Strickland versus Paulo Costa and Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. That's going to be quite interesting, man. But in other news, Jon Jones is apparently doubling down on ducking. Well, this might even be tripling down at this point on not fighting Tom Aspinall. He just came out and said that he'd rather fight Alex Pereira because it's a bigger fight, more people care about it, but he's doing this at the expense of the heavyweight division and the interim champion. When you're an interim champion, you should be able to fight the undisputed champ if they are available. Jon Jones right now is injured. When he comes back, his first fight should be with Tom Aspinall. That's how it should be ordered. But we're running it back with the whole GSP, Michael Bisping, and Robert Whittaker thing. Where Bisping didn't fight Whittaker, he instead fought GSP. And now Jon Jones is saying after he fights Stipe, he said he's going to fight Alex Pereira next. Which by itself, I actually don't have any problems with. I would like to see Jon Jones versus Pereira, Jon Jones versus Stipe, but not for the undisputed title. You got to keep the order going in the heavyweight division. You can't jam it up. If Jones vacated the title, because he is above it, he doesn't need a title. If he vacated the title and allowed Tom Aspinall to be the undisputed champion to defend the belt, then Jones can have all these fights, man. I don't think anybody minds that. Nobody minds Jon Jones fighting Stipe. Nobody minds Jon Jones fighting Alex Pereira. It's just that he's holding the heavyweight title hostage at the same time. And I understand from the business side of it, if they do the Alex Pereira fight next, it is a bigger fight to put together, it is a bigger pay-per-view card. And there's history that could be made there. Because Alex Pereira, if he beats Jon Jones for the undisputed title, he becomes the first ever 3-division champion in UFC history. But if Jon Jones wins, he puts Alex Pereira as another champion he defeated in a title fight, racking up that record of title wins. But I just don't think that Jon Jones needs it himself. I think he's above the championship at this point. Without counting PEDs, he's the greatest fighter of all time by far. I don't think anybody's close. He's one of the biggest pay-per-view draws. Guys like him and Conor McGregor don't need the belt to sell their fights. But Jones wants the belt for legacy reasons, which I do understand, but he's getting his way at the expense of Tom Aspinall, the top 5 of the heavyweight division, and the legitimacy of the heavyweight title. I think Jon Jones destroys Stipe. I think he takes down and beats up Alex Pereira. I don't know if he beats Tom Aspinall, though. That is the fight that needs to happen, because Jon Jones did not beat a champion to get the belt. He beat Ciryl Gane, who wasn't the interim champ at the time. He was just a contender. And yes, Ciryl Gane's a really good heavyweight. He's a guy that almost beat Francis Ngannou, but beating Tom Aspinall at this point credits Jon Jones with beating some kind of champion in the heavyweight division. If he beats Tom Aspinall, nobody's going to be talking like this about Jon Jones, right? Nobody's going to be asking for a fight with like some other contender, because Aspinall, as what we know right now, is the best of the bunch, of the Pavloviches, of the Gans, of the Almeidas, of the Blades. It looks like Tom Aspinall might be the best out of those guys. He holds the belt. He just washed Pavlovich. I think stylistically he beats Ciryl Gane by taking him to the ground and submitting him. He would send Almeida back to the light heavyweight division. Blades is a tough fight for him. I think that's a more competitive fight with Tom Aspinall stylistically. But I do think overall, you could say that Tom Aspinall is the best of those right now. That's the guy Jon Jones needs to beat. And this is what happens when champions call their shots and stuff. I don't like this sort of thing. Unless it makes make sense, unless they're putting themselves in a dangerous stylistic matchup, like when Israel Adesanya called out Yoel Romero. Before we knew how the fight was actually going to play out, where they're going to stare at each other for 5 rounds, we all thought that was a respectable call out because Yoel Romero on paper was supposed to be Adesanya's toughest matchup. Even though Romero was coming off 2 losses in a row, it was a fight that nobody minded because stylistically, Romero should have been the guy that would beat Adesanya on paper. And he was also the guy that a lot of people thought beat Whittaker in the rematch. He had a close fight with Paulo Costa after. Those are the kind of call-outs that the fans don't mind when you're actually putting yourself in a dangerous stylistic matchup. Jon Jones is putting himself in favorable stylistic matchups, calling out his shots. He wants to fight old man Stipe, and it's no disrespect to Stipe, it's the fact of the matter. Stipe is old, man. Fighters age, and he's up there. He hasn't fought in like 3 years. His last fight was a knockout loss to Francis Ngannou. And physically, he doesn't look great when we saw that video of him walking into the arena. Now, it could be that he might have stumped his leg, may have like accidentally gotten hurt in training, someone kicked him. Maybe something happened, but it just was not a good look. Calling that guy out. I like it for Stipe in his camp. I like it for Jon Jones in his camp, but I'm looking at the heavyweight division. I'm looking at most of the fighters there. This is not a good thing for the heavyweight division. They need an order where the undisputed champion versus the interim champion, then fights the contenders and all that stuff. That's what every division needs. That's not just heavyweight. Every division needs order. Look how long it took for the lightweight division to get back on track. After Conor came up to that division, got the belt, didn't defend it for years, Khabib beat L.I. Quinta for the title on short notice, then fought Conor McGregor. It took such a long time for any champion to defend against a rightful contender at the lightweight division. And the same thing could happen here in heavyweight. We should learn from the past of what happened at lightweight and not replicate it again for the heavyweight division. Because if Jon Jones goes out there and fights Stipe, destroys him, right? He takes another year or so to fight Alex Pereira, beats him, doesn't vacate or retire for another year or something. Tom Aspinall is going to be the one that's actually defending the title against contenders. How long would it actually take for Jon Jones to defend his belt against a contender or the interim champion? And I know there are some people that would think, but who cares about heavyweight? Let Jon Jones do it. Heavyweight is full of the blobs. The blob era seems to be gone now, right? The blob era was there for a few years where they were going up into the top 5 somehow, but they're all beaten out of the top 5 now, and most of them are beaten out of the top 10. The top 5 is actually looking pretty good here. Tom Aspinall, Pavlovich, Cyril Gane, Curtis Blades. We got an order that's actually pretty interesting here at the top of the heavyweight division. They can work with this. Tom Aspinall can absolutely be a star out of the UK. Pavlovich can absolutely be a star out of mainland Russia. Cyril Gane can absolutely be a big star out of France. Like, there's a lot of potential here, but it's all getting put onto Jon Jones. All the focus is on what Jon Jones is doing, and they're allowing him to fight who he wants. So it's not only at the expense of the heavyweight division, just generally speaking, and the interim champion, the legitimacy of the belt, but even the potential that all these younger heavyweights have of becoming future stars. Because if Jon Jones retires after this without ever fighting the interim champion, you know what a lot of the casual fans are going to be thinking about this weight class. Who cares about Aspinall? Who cares about Pavlovich? Jones was a champ. He retired. Nobody beat him. All these other guys are just placeholders at that point. They're paper champions. But can you imagine if Jones, he gets his way and fights Pereira after Stipe? What if Pereira knocked him out? Like he timed a perfect knee when Jon Jones was going for a takedown, flat knockout, Pereira becomes a 3-division champion. You know how insane that would be? Even though it shouldn't happen, it would be a legendary moment. You would have to say that Pereira is one of the greatest fighters of all time, right? I know there would be a lot of people who say he is the greatest of all time, number 1. The fight shouldn't happen, but man, that would be wild. Or if Stipe, what if Stipe knocked Jones out? There would be no argument at that point as to who's greater, Fedor or Stipe? It would 100% be Stipe. Fedor's never beaten a fighter as great as Jon Jones. Well, nobody has beaten a fighter probably as great as Jon Jones, Except Dominic Reyes. Reyes is the true GOAT. And so is Anthony Smith. He showed pity on Jon Jones, but not going for that DQ win. What a humble king. And speak of Alex Pereira, it looks like he wants to fight Jiri Prochazka. And the reason as to why is because Magomed Ankalaev is calling the shots to fight in Abu Dhabi. That's all we know. And Pereira is saying that Magomed is not going to get his way here. He's not the champ. He doesn't get to pick the place that we fight. And now he's saying he wants to fight Jiri in response. So something may have happened in between these two pieces of news. I don't know exactly, but it seems like maybe Magomed can only fight in Abu Dhabi, or he only wants to fight in Abu Dhabi. Because if he's willing to fight anywhere else, why isn't that fight getting put together? If he's just saying, I'd rather fight in Abu Dhabi, but I'll fight you in Brazil or wherever it is. Okay, then put the fight together. Magomed, Pereira. But if Pereira is saying that now he's fighting Jiri, something else may have happened here. Maybe Pereira doesn't want to fight Magomed. That doesn't seem like it's in his character, but Perhaps. All the possibilities are out there. Either Magomed doesn't want to fight in another place other than Abu Dhabi, or Pereira doesn't want to fight Magomed. And Jiri's even talking about going down to 185 because he just doesn't cut a lot of weight for 205. He walks around like 218 pounds, which is really light for light heavyweight. I don't think he should move down to 185 though. I know we have this like perspective that the bigger you are, the better you're going to be at these weight classes. But imagine him cutting another 20 pounds. I don't know if he would be the same guy. And he's already performing so well at 205. He's super autistic, like amazing up there. I'm saying autistic in a good way. He's super focused. He's super intelligent in his own kind of way that we just don't understand. His training methods are unlike anybody else's. Jiri is an autistic king, and we love that about him. He only lost to Alex Pereira there, and he was doing very well before the knockout. He can absolutely make some really good adjustments and beat Pereira. That's how good he is. So why change things up for 185? Why fix something that isn't broken? If he was losing like 3-4 in a row at 205, okay, then move down, But he only lost to Pereira and beat everybody else he's fought. Those guys at 185 are going to be faster. They're not going to cut as much weight. Well, at least most of them are. Paulo Costa probably does. It's just a whole different game, and we don't even know what happened to Jiri's power in his chin. It could completely change at 185. Look what happened to Michael Johnson when he moved down to 145. His power disappeared. He wasn't hurting a fly at 145, but at 155, he's still knocking people out. And if Jiri's chin goes away, it's over for him. He's way too hittable. Guys like Adesanya, Robert Whittaker, Imavov, like these really dangerous strikers would probably put him down if he doesn't have the chin to take the punches. Because look what happened with him and Rakic. If he didn't have that chin against Rakic, he would have gotten put down. Cutting the extra 20 pounds at 185 might destroy his chin, and we do not want to see that. And he doesn't seem to be too small for 205. Like, weight-wise, he factually is, but his strength and chin are very good for 205. That's kind of like Alexandre Pantoja. Can you imagine if Pantoja didn't have a legendary chin? We talk about techniques a lot, skills and techniques, but man, these attributes definitely help these fighters tremendously, because if Pantoja had an average chin, he probably would not be the champion right now. Or at least defended that belt against Erceg. He would have gotten knocked out most likely. So we're going to go right to the first question by Richard Connolly. Hey Weasel, thanks for the content, man, and all the work you put in. No problem, man, and thank you as well. Number one, of all these fighters, who do you see retiring with their final fight being a final win or a bang war? No Jones. And who do you see retiring on a sad loss or downfall that makes us reminisce on who they once were? Dustin, Volk, Charles, Holloway. I would probably say Volk, for the main reason that he reached such a high peak. To see a downfall from that would be pretty sad. He's one of the greatest fighters of all time, the greatest Australian fighter in history. That would be the saddest downfall. And you got two more questions. Try to limit to just one question next time. Number two, do you see Islam doing like Usman did with Colby in the first fight? Just accepting the stand-up and having a war with someone and showing off all their striking skills? Or is he just not that kind of fighter in your opinion? No, I see Islam trying to beat him everywhere. Try to take him to the ground, try to strike with him. Whatever presents itself, he's going to go for that. And number three, Ilya is one of the most skilled guys in the sport. But what do you think of his general attitude and mindset as champ? Max was the kind of champ that was always ready to defend his throne. Volk liked to say he still behaved like a hungry contender, even as champ. But with Ilya, though, he doesn't seem to align with either. So what do you think about it? Yeah, he views his status above everybody else's, like a king would. None of you guys can contest with me. I can do what I want. I call my shots. Everything goes with how I see it. He views himself as a superstar as well as a champion, whereas Max and Volk didn't really look at themselves like superstars. I think that's the main difference. Then we'll go to Samwise Gamgee. Hi Weasel, keep up the great content, man. Thank you so much. Let's play some what ifs. How do you see Charlie Olives doing against welterweights top 10? And the same for Arman Tsarukyan in featherweight, assuming they make the proper adjustments to cut or bulk up for each weight class. Greetings from Mexico. I hope this doesn't trigger Sean Strickland because I'm both Mexican and American. Yeah, that's pretty funny. How would Charles do at 170 against the top 10? I don't think too well, but let's see here. He probably loses to Jeff Neal. I don't know if he could take Jeff Neal to the ground. He might beat Wonderboy. He beats Sean Brady. He loses to Ian Gary. Him and Burns can have a great fight. I don't know who wins that one. He loses to Jack Della, beats Colby Covington, loses to Shavkat, beats Bilal Muhammad, loses to Usman, and loses to Edwards. He's just so much smaller than some of these guys. And then for Arman at featherweight, he beats Giga, he beats Kelvin Cater, beats Aljamain, beats Josh Emmett, beats Arnold Allen, beats Mavsar, destroys Yair. He beats Ortega probably. I mean, the fact that he took down Charles and beat him on the ground overall, as close as that fight was, I think he should do pretty well against Ortega as well, who has much worse striking. I think Arman can hit him some clean shots in the stand-up. Max Holloway Holloway. Now, your question is saying that Arman is making a good weight cut here. I think he could beat Max because of the wrestling, but striking-wise, he gets annihilated. Holloway's been taken down quite a bit throughout his career against guys like Volk. Yair even took him down one time. Ortega took him down a couple times, but man, I don't know. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm going to go with Max Holloway. That's a great fight, though. Now, if Volkanovski's not washed, he beats Arman Tsarukyan. If he is washed, I'm picking Arman. And Ilia Topuria, I would pick Ilia. He has a very good style against Arman. Look at Mike Griffith. I remember when everyone thought Gaethje was going to beat Holloway, and I told everyone that Max was going to have an easy day with him. And it turns out I was right. And now I see people talking about if Chandler beats Conor, then we're going to do Chandler versus Max for the BMF title. And I'm like, oh, come on, people. Michael Chandler has absolutely no business in the ring with Max. No chance at all. This would be even easier for Max than Gaethje was. Do you agree with me? And do you agree that Conor versus Max Holloway would be a much better matchup? Conor would give Max a huge run for his money. Yes, I do think Max Holloway destroys Michael Chandler. If he could figure out Justin Gaethje the way he did, he could absolutely figure out Michael Chandler, who's way more one-dimensional in the stand-up than Gaethje is. He gets pretty wild sometimes. The feints of Max would cause a downfall of Chandler pretty early on as he capitalizes on those openings, and after the fight gets out of the second round, it's over. If we're getting Maximus Holloway, he would knock Chandler out. Now, Conor versus Max is a much more difficult fight if Conor is in good form. Conor has a very good style to beat Max Holloway, but at this state of their careers, I have to go with Maximus Holloway, 100%. I do think Conor will surprise a lot of people early on, but I think once we get into the 4th and 5th rounds, Max might TKO Conor. The first 2 rounds would be pretty dicey for Max, though. Look at the Nano Peach. Hey, Weasel, thanks for the content. What Conor are you expecting to show up at UFC 303? Probably something similar that we saw in the last Dustin fight, but I really don't know. He could look completely washed. With USADA gone, though, we might see Prime Conor 2.0. We have no idea. Really hard to know what he's going to look like. Zhang Weili versus Suarez. How does this play out? I'm interested in this one because I've been saying it for a while that Suarez is the only fighter at 115 that has a dominance over an area of the game. Zhang Weili cannot wrestle with Suarez. I think, at least. And Zhang Weili has been using a lot of wrestling and grappling in her recent fights to get the wins. Now, she's by far the better striker of the two. She seems to have better cardio. She has much more experience at the top. But I would not be surprised if Suarez takes her down multiple times in the fight and wins rounds because of her grappling and her physicality. She's extremely strong herself. I just think her cardio will probably fail her because of all the resistance that Zhang would give her on the ground. And once we get into those championship rounds, Suarez might be in a lot of trouble, desperately shooting takedowns, much slower pace, a lot more labored movement, and Weili could even get a TKO late after losing like the first 2 or 3 rounds. That's the most interesting fight at 115. Most uncomfortable beating in MMA history, in your opinion. Someone else asked this question as well. I'm going to get to that later. And what's next for Mike Perry? And whatever he wants. I don't even know who's at BKFC that he can fight. I'm just tuning in whenever he does fight, whoever it's against. Mike Perry is the guy. He's the superstar at BKFC. He's getting paid millions of dollars, which is something that we never thought for Mike Perry. When would you ever think that Mike Perry would get $1 million a fight or $600,000 a fight? It's incredible. His fight with Thiago Elves, there's rumors that he got paid $600,000 for that. And I think against like MVP or whoever it was in the past, he got paid $1 million. Mike Perry's living his best life, man. I've never seen a fighter go into a more fitting sport than Mike Perry. He's found his niche, he's found his home, and he's making all the money in the world for it. I'm so happy for the guy. Mike Perry's living a true success story. Then your next question, Dustin versus Islam is going to be worse than Khabib versus Dustin in terms of competition. I don't know, actually. Islam will entertain a technical back and forth striking match with Dustin, and he will try to keep things as clean as they can be. Where Khabib ran Dustin to the ground, I don't know if Islam does the same thing to him, though. I think this is going to be the test for a lot of people to compare Islam to Khabib. If Islam beats Dustin easier or worse than Khabib did, everybody's going to say Islam is better than Khabib. But if he doesn't, everybody's going to say Khabib is better than Islam. But we have to mention that the Dustin that fought Khabib arguably was better than the Dustin we see today, right? The Dustin that fought Khabib might have been his prime form, or the one that fought Conor in the second and third fights. Then we go to the worthwhile MMA. Is Jon Jones gay? I think that question has already been academically answered. The real question now is how much? On a range from Peyton Talbot to P. Diddy, kinda zesty, to full blown out and uncomfortably aggressive, judging from the evidence, I would probably point toward the latter. And I don't know if it's just you guys, but every interview I see of Jon Jones now looks different. The laugh, the cadence, the things he says, just like Diddy, him being sus isn't a problem. It's how weirdly aggressive he is. Bro was allegedly touching another man's crotch at a comedy club, saying how he wants to finger strangers in his favorite spot publicly. Can you imagine what would happen to a man if he greets women that way? I don't know if that's a normal thing to say at a comedy club, but that's just weird, man. Imagine what Colby had to go through living living with him, right? Colby gets ready to go to bed, had a good snack, gets in his covers, he's ready for a good night's sleep. Then bam, Jones opens the door and in comes Tyler behind him, both smiling. And Colby's just like watching from the other side of the room, trying to cover his eyes. Hey Colby, you awake? Yes, John. Come on, John. It's the 4th time today. Colby, just let me know whenever you want to join. If your roommate was bringing in men to bang at night, do you stay in your bed and try to sleep through all that noise? Or do you sleep outside in the car or something? No, I'm just kidding. All this is jokes. I'm just joking. Would you rather fight a straight Jon Jones or a slanted Jon Jones? Which would you rather go up against? That's the question a lot of his opponents now have to ask themselves. Then we go to Yoel Castro. Is the era of Derek Lewis's and Tai Tuivasa's in the heavyweight division finally dead? I think so, and we have someone like Cyril Gane to thank for that. I know he's been getting a lot of flack, which is deserving. I'm trying to call his shots for some reason. He beat the Blobs out of the top 5, and we have to give him credit for that. And there hasn't been another one since, and they've been tumbling and rolling down the rankings ever since. But are they going to have the resurgence? Can it be possible that the revenge of the Blobs happens in like 4 years from now? They go to Intent Chief. Did you know PFL doesn't actually give $1 million to the season winner? All the fights before taxes from the season add up to $1 million. Yet they give out a giant check claiming to give $1 million prize at the end. So you're saying taxes get pulled out of the $1 million, of course, right? I figured as much. Of course, you're going to have to tax the $1 million check after it's given to you. And I do believe part of the $1 million prize is also from the semifinal, not just the finals. So the last 2 fights, unless I'm wrong on this, the last 2 fights of the tournament, semifinals and finals, are both included the $1 million check. So let's say a fighter makes $200,000 in their semifinal fight. They deduct that from the $1 million check for the final fight. That means they're going to make $800,000 in the final fight. So both the semifinals and finals will equal up to that $1 million prize. But I believe the first 2 fights in the tournament, they get paid. To my understanding, that doesn't have anything to really do with the final check. It's still good though, regardless. I mean, most of these guys that fight in the PFL that made $1 million would never get $1 million in the UFC. Impa Kazanage, Brendan Lefnane probably would never see that money anywhere else. And that's why I think these other promotions are really good. It's for those kind of fighters. They're good for the PFL to make a bunch of money. Because let's say they get like 7 figures or high 6 figures in a year after winning a tournament, they'd probably be making 100 grand. They'd probably be making 100 or 200 grand in the UFC. They're with the Sleepy Squirtle. What was the most uncomfortable beatdown in UFC history where you were begging for the fight to be stopped? Jalen Turner, Bobby Green, 100%. It looked like the guy was going to get unalived out there. Crazy to see him come back so soon and beat Jim Miller the way he did. BJ Penn versus Yair Rodriguez was a fight that shouldn't even have been made. Like, that should even have started. Crazy they put that one together. Eve Edwards knocking out Josh Thompson was a big one. That was the one where he was holding his back. Josh Thompson, I believe, threw a spinning back fist, and at the same time, Edwards countered him with a hopping head kick. Full power to the side of the head, put him down and hit him with like 15 unanswered punches. It was crazy. But that was the Wild West in those early days, man. There was a lot of really bad finishes like that because nobody believed in CTE, right? We had guys like Vanderlei Silva believing that if you got hit in the head, it made your chin stronger. And those were the days that the GOAT, Steve Mazzagatti, reigned supreme. Another one that was sad to watch was Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje. Once it came into that 4th round, man, you were hoping it was going to stop. Glover Teixeira and Fabio Maldonado was a big one, where Glover just pummeled this guy for 3 rounds. They get caught, though, I believe, in the 3rd round, which is credit to Fabio Maldonado's heart and ability to just come back. Edson Barboza annihilating Dan Hooker. Do you guys remember all those body shots he hit him with? That's a different kind of toughness test. Just taking that many body shots, when do you give up? And when does your body just shut down, man? We had some crazy ones over the years. Look at the Dre Johnson. Rapid fire fantasy matchups in their absolute prime. Chris Weidman versus Alex Pereira. Gotta go with Weidman. Lyoto Machida versus Alex Pereira. I'm gonna go with Pereira. Anthony Johnson versus Pereira. I'm gonna go with Pereira. Gus versus Pereira. Going with Gustafsson. Rashad Evans versus Luke Rockhold. I'm gonna go with Luke. Yoel Romero versus Anderson Silva. I'm gonna go with Romero. Jacare Souza versus Dricus Duplessis. I'm gonna go with Jacare. Roy McDonald versus Leon Edwards. I'm gonna go with Leon. Wonderboy versus Leon Edwards. Also gonna go with Leon. Robbie Lawler versus Shavkat Rachmanov. Oh, that's a tough one because we're looking at the Robbie that fought Rory the 2nd time. which was the best form we've ever seen Robbie in. Stylistically, I might go Robbie, but it could go either way. Gegard Mousasi versus Sean Strickland. I'm going to go with Gegard. Nick Diaz versus Jorge Masvidal at welterweight. I'm going to go with Jorge. That's a close one. Gilbert Burns versus pre-USADA Johnny Hendricks, the version that fought GSP. Oh, definitely going with Hendricks. Fabricio Verdum versus Tom Aspinall. Aspinall. Why would you do that to Verdum? What does Verdum do to this guy? Plod forward, throwing jabs at him, try to take down and flopping to his back? Nothing would work for Verdum in that fight. Just stylistically, he can't take down Aspinall at all, and he cannot box with him at all. He's got some kicks he could go to, but that's pretty much it. He's so unathletic compared to Tom. He's so slow compared to him. Doesn't hit as hard. He's weaker. Doesn't have the wrestling. Doesn't have the boxing skill. That is actually one of the worst stylistic matchups for Fabricio Verdum. Look at Prince Malcolm. Who is the most entitled fighter in the UFC? My pick is Ciryl. I beat 3 fat, non-skilled heavyweights. Give me infinite title shots gone. I mean, if you look at his Ciryl Gane's eyes, that's like 800 pounds of lard that he pummeled. The most entitled fighter. Ciryl Gane is definitely one of them. Magomed Ankalaev talking about how Pereira's got to fight him in Abu Dhabi and stuff like that. I don't blame Pereira too much of overlooking that. Unless Ankalaev is willing to fight somewhere else, right? If he's only willing to fight in Abu Dhabi, that is crazy. Who else was super entitled? You guys remember Conor wanted to fight Diego Sanchez? The entitlement of an easy fight. I have never seen that before. How dare anyone on Conor's level try to call out Diego Sanchez at that time? And that was like fresh off the breakup with Joshua Fabia. But I'd probably say Ronda Rousey has to be one of them. Not necessarily for matchups as much as she wanted people to treat her like a queen, right? Like an actual walking, living divine being. Kneel down when she's walking around, but the only knee she gets is from Travis Brown. No, I'm just kidding. None of that's true. Then we're going to add Astra Stake Pool. Who would you favor in a hypothetical matchup between Prime Poatan and Prime Rumble at 205? RIP Anthony Johnson, indeed, man. Anthony Johnson was such a powerful fighter, man. Would I think would have won? Poatan. Rumble's powerful and fast, but he made a lot of technical mistakes that I think Poatan would have countered. Rumble's also smaller than Poatan, which is crazy to think about. And a lot of people say, how did Poatan fight at 185? Well, the real question is, how did Rumble fight at 170? Both these guys could have fought as a small heavyweight, and were actually true 205ers, but I do think Poatan would have chipped away at the leg kicks. Rumble kept a very wide stance, which creates a bit of a different angle for Poatan's kicks to connect, but Rumble in his prime was fighting at a time where the calf kick wasn't as recognized, and I don't think he would know what to do handling that technique other than just try to blitz over with overhands and stuff. But even at that, Poatan's jab would have been on point the entire time, from head to body, check left hooks. Whenever Rumble explodes, he always drops his hands. All I will say though for Rumble's chances are, he probably has one of the best chances of knocking Poatan out at 205, but I still think he loses. What about his wrestling? I don't think too much of it. He could take people down, he just didn't have like the greatest control. He spazzed out a lot of times when he was wrestling. Then with the built-in MMA. Hey Weasel, how does Alex Perez fit into the flyweight title contention with his track history and recent loss to Mokaev? He's got to be in the weirdest position for a fighter in a very long time, yeah. So he just got a really good win against Nicolau. In my opinion, the best win of his entire career. I mean, the only reason he was fighting the top-ranked guys was because he beat Jussier Formiga as easily as he did. But in hindsight, Formiga's already done. I mean, that was his second last fight of his career. For people that don't know about Jussier Formiga, his downfall came very, very quickly. He went from a guy who beat Ben Nguyen, who was really good at the time, then he beat Sergio Pettis after that on the Conor Habib card, then he beat Davison Figueiredo after that, to losing 3 in a row. Joseph Benavidez TKO'd him, Brandon Moreno beat him, and then Alex Perez TKO'd him by leg kicks. He was done. Like, his prime free fell after that Joseph Benavidez loss, and I don't think he ever recovered from it. That's one of those crippling losses that nobody talks about, which I understand. It's Jussier Formiga and it's flyweight, but for a guy who's been really good and been fighting for a long time and was on the best win streak of his entire career, the fall from grace has to be talked about more often. I mean, he beat Pettis and Figgy back to back, became one of the top ranked flyweights in the world, and then got destroyed by Joseph Benavidez and never recovered. He fought 2 years later after losing to Perez, to Felipe Bunes in the LFA. He missed weight for the fight and got choked out in the second round. When Alex Perez beat him, he was already out of the game. So it put Alex Perez in a position where he was not ready to fight the top guys like Davison, Pantoja, and Mokaev. He lost all 3 of those fights, but found his ground against Nicolau, who's a very good fighter. Like, technically speaking, Nicolau's striking is really, really good, and he knocked him out, man. The best I've ever seen Alex Perez perform against a credible opponent. But just judging from his performances not that long ago, he was not on that level, at all, but we find him yet again in the top 5. A very weird place for him. He might need like 2 or 3 wins to rematch Pantoja, and I just don't see him doing it. I really don't. I don't see him getting 2 or 3 wins against Kai Kara-France, Amir Albazi, Brenner Moreno, Brandon Royval. If Moreno is actually declining, which I hope not, but if he's actually declining, that could be something that Perez can get, right? He's rising, Moreno's falling, it could be possible. But as we know from both fighters in their primes, Moreno should be way better than Perez. So no, I just don't see it, unless he's in a very lucky position. Then we'll go to another one from Drake Johnson. You guys really like his questions. Let's say instead of rushing back in 6 months after a brutal injury he sustained after tripping over a wire, that wire is still undefeated, Tony Ferguson took a year off to rehab, rest his brain, work out, bulk a little, but when he returned in 2019, it was at welterweight. How different do you think these last few years would have turned out for him? No making weight for fun incident or 155 cuts in general. No fighting Justin Gaethje while his brain was probably still dehydrated, etc. I know the competition wasn't crazy, but he looked good at 170 during the Ultimate Fighter. That's pretty difficult speculation to think about. So if someone kept Tony in a bubble from hurting himself, took a long time to rest, came back in 2019 as a welterweight, was bigger, chin was as fresh as it could be at that age, I think Tony could have done pretty well. I don't think he would have became champion because those guys were bigger than him. Tony's always been like I don't know, would you call Tony a big lightweight throughout his career? Because even if he bulked up, I don't expect him to be an actual welterweight, because when he was fighting at 170 in the Ultimate Fighter and before the Ultimate Fighter, he was going up against guys who weren't as big as they are today or in 2019, right? Imagine him fighting Kamaru Usman. I don't think he beats Usman. Could he beat guys like Colby Covington? Possibly. Colby's wrestling would give him a really hard time though, but Tony was a wizard off of his back. And being bigger with the added bulk, more power in his shots, he was more of a power puncher at 170. Yeah, he might have been able to beat Colby. Jorge would have been an interesting fight. Nate Diaz would have been interesting. I think he would have beaten Nate Diaz. Gilbert Burns would have been a really interesting fight too. Tony would have been probably toward the top of that weight class. I just don't see him beating someone like Kamaru Usman. I think he could have had a hard time with Leon. Him and Burns would have been a bit back and forth. Maybe Burns' chin fails him in the fight, whereas Tony might get hurt by some of the big shots and recover. He definitely does not want to get taken to the ground by someone like Burns. He could have probably beaten Damian Maia as well. So Tony definitely would have been at the top of the welterweight division in my opinion, which would have been really fun. I've always wanted to see Tony go back up in his prime to 170 just to see what he would be able to do. Then we go to Nitin. Is Dustin the Lisan El Gaib? Who's that? From the Dune universe? I don't know what that is. Then we go to Baboon. Hey Weasel, love the content. I'm very excited for Khamzat vs. Rob in June. It's a super interesting stylistic matchup in my opinion, and I'm very curious about the game plan each fighter will have. Here's my question. If you were Khamzat's or Rob's coach, what would your game plan be for both of these fighters? Thanks. No problem, brother. Thank you for the question. If I were either of their coaches, what would I game plan for? Fight for the first 3 rounds. I don't think Khamzat has a 4th and 5th round in him, especially against someone like Rob. I could be wrong on that. Just knowing what I know from the outside, it looks like that's not what Khamzat's style is revolved around. Fighting for 5 rounds. Doesn't seem to have the cardio for it. But then again, pacing himself could fix that, knowing that Robert Whittaker isn't necessarily the most active fighter. He doesn't put that much pressure on you. So maybe Khamzat could fight at that pace for 5 rounds. Who knows? I would tell Khamzat you have to rotate from orthodox to southpaw in order to fool Rob into falling to that jab. And whenever Rob enters in and looks to exit, always look for the hooks on those exits, as Rob usually does expose his chin there. And also mix up those intercepting jabs with takedowns, right? Countering everything Rob does is going to be a bit of a formula for Khamzat in my opinion. And constantly feint, non-stop feinting, give looks for jabs, make it look like you're gonna throw a right hand by showing the shoulder and stuff like that. Just get Rob to back up a bit so his explosion forward is gonna be a lot more obvious. And that's a way you could kind of intercept him. Getting super aggressive with the hands on Rob is probably not the best thing to do unless Khamzat is looking for the takedown behind those. If he's not looking for the takedown, I wouldn't advise Khamzat to get aggressive with the boxing just by itself. He's got to need takedowns behind those. And keep a faster pace for the first 3 rounds and try to get him out of there then. That probably would be my game plan in this. I just don't know if Khamzat has the cardio to go 5 rounds at Rob's pace. Now for Robert Whittaker, feinting is the biggest thing for Rob in my opinion, and keep a good rhythm going and break up your tempo. Don't make everything too obvious for Khamzat in order to digest. The feints are going to be kind of disruptive, right? Always look like you're going to blitz in or something. The stutter steps are going to be very big for Rob, and if he does enter, he should take off those angles as exits, as I don't know if Khamzat's actual coaches will tell him to anticipate it and intercept it with hooks. And never, ever stay in front of him. Never at any moment stand in front of Khamzat Chimaev. Keep an idle stance from long range as usual, throw all the feints out there, blitz in, and immediately get off on angles, but never routinely off the same angle. Then we go to the next question. How much do you think Gaethje and Oliveira are now regretting taking fights, since now Islam and and Dustin is announced for UFC 301. You mean 302? It seems like both of them dropped the ball. Yeah, it happens in this game. And I know we talk a lot about like take up every opportunity that presents itself, but this time it hurt them. It's not, I guess it's not a formula. You know, I know Dana says that all the time. Dana says every fighter has to take every opportunity they get. In this case, it hurt Gaethje and Oliveira where they would have been able to fight Islam Makhachev instead of who they fought. And it's worse for Gaethje because look what happened to him. At least Oliveira lost a very, very close decision and he did not get damaged. Gaethje turned into a highlight reel of all time. Like, can you imagine? You're not just a highlight of a night, of a month, of a year. You are going to be remembered for getting KO'd in probably the most emphatic way possible of all time. Gaethje will get the respect for throwing down with Max like that, but he was the guy that got flatlined. And before that, he was losing the fight. And the crazy thing about all of that was that fight didn't mean anything to Gaethje's career necessarily. If he beat Max Holloway, it was something a lot of people just expected. He was a big favorite going into the fight. He was the BMF champ, putting that on the line as well. He was getting paid as a champion. That's what mattered about that whole thing. I know we say BMF is just a toy belt. That belt is worth like hundreds of thousands of dollars for Justin Gaethje. Most likely got pay-per-view points because of that thing. So I guess in a sense, that part was worth it. Money's always worth something, but how much does it matter to lose a fight like that? And Max was not an opponent he needed to fight. His goal was ultimately getting to Islam Makhachev. You know what the crazy thing about that is? I don't know if he would have gotten pay-per-view points fighting Islam Makhachev unless they put the BMF title on the line. Isn't that kind of crazy? And that probably goes for Max Holloway as well. Unless they treat him as champions without even defending it. Kind of like maybe Volk fighting Islam at 155. Did he get pay-per-view points for that? Because technically he was a champion, just not defending it. I don't know how their contracts go with that. So is Max going to get pay-per-view points when he fights Ilia Topuria if he doesn't put the BMF title up? That I don't know. In that case, if Justin would have gotten pay-per-view points against Islam regardless, if he fought him in June instead of Max in April, then this fight meant nothing for him. Even the money probably didn't mean as much unless 300 sold more than what 302 is going to sell, which it most likely did. And the worst thing about all that is, I don't think Gaethje will ever be the same after that. He took so much damage upon some TKOs and wars he's been a part of throughout his career. That might be the worst thing of all of this. If Gaethje goes into his next fight and he's not the same guy, that might be the biggest regret of Gaethje's entire career. I know he probably would never admit that because he was a part of a battle with Max Holloway and that warrior pride in him would never admit that it was a regret. But logistically, it didn't seem like a great move. Knowing the outcome and everything, it had to have been a big regret. Then we go to Oakenlicks. Does the fact that we poop prove that there is no God? Oh, now we're getting to the real questions. Taking a poop feels really good, right? No Jones. But we got some replies here. Let's see what the scholars say. Professor Arcanum says it doesn't. I concur. Oakenlicks tells him, but then why would he create us in such a way? Poop is gross. Not if you're German. I wonder how many people understand that reference. Professor Arcanum says, poop is awesome. I concur. Oakenlicks concedes his argument with fair point. And Sam Sarindel the Savant says, I pooped out this burrito, and that is proof that there is a God. I agree. I'm sorry, Oakenlicks, but you have been debunked, my friend. Thank you, scholars. Then we go to Who's House Football. Who wins these fights, Prime versus Prime? Uriah Fair versus TJ Dillashaw. I'm going to go with TJ. Aljamain Sterling versus Marab. I'm going to go with Aljamain. Randy Couture versus Vanderlei Silva. I'm going to go with Couture. Maybe. Ronda Rousey versus Chris Cyborg. I'm going to go with Chris Cyborg. There's a reason why Ronda not only ran away from the division, also the whole promotion. Never facing Chris Cyborg when that was supposed to be her next opponent. Big Nog versus Brock Lesnar. I'm going to go with Brock. Robert Whittaker versus Anderson Silva. I'm going to go with Whittaker, but that's close. It's hard for me to ever pick against Anderson. Anthony Pettis versus Jose Aldo. Definitely going with Aldo. Dan Henderson versus Jon Jones. H-bomb all day. No, I'm just kidding. Jones will beat him off. Rumble Johnson versus Francis Ngannou. 100% Ngannou. Fedor Emelianenko versus Cain Velasquez. I'm gonna go with Fedor. That might be a hot take. I don't know if it is, but I'm going with Fedor. And for the final question, has Arman's performance versus Charles given you more or less confidence that he could beat Islam? And how will Islam react to someone trying to take him down for a change? Interesting question. Well, firstly, there have been fighters who have tried to take down Islam in the past, like Thiago Moises, who successfully did so, and of course Arman the first time he fought Islam. But he's gonna run into that same exact opponent again. And stemming off the performance against Charles Oliveira, I don't think Arman beats Islam. In fact, I think it's a more convincing win for Islam this time. I'm much more confident in him beating Arman, mainly because of the difference in the striking. Islam's striking has advanced so far, whereas Arman's striking hasn't progressed as much. The wrestling could be pretty interesting between the two. I think it could potentially neutralize, but I think Islam is going to beat Arman due to the striking difference. And that is ultimately the end of the podcast, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to give this a like, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you guys in the next video.